Hi, everyone. Welcome to this session on digital transformation at scale. I'll start with a quick introduction. My name is Apurv Pandey. I'm a partner at Foundation Capital. For all those who are new to Build and to Foundation Capital, we are an early stage venture fund, been around for like 25 plus years. I'm welcoming my two awesome panelists over here who are leaders of technology at two Fortune 500 consumer brands, Marty and Alan. Before we get into the session itself, I'll quickly describe the format. We'll talk to the panelists, dig into discussion topics, and then after that there'll be a Q&A. If you guys have any questions that come up as we go, feel free to put those questions in the comment section on the right, and I'll pick up those questions as we go. So without further ado, Mari, maybe we can start with your quick introduction. It'll be really helpful if you could talk a bit about not just your current role, but also your few experiences of the past, and
Yeah,
kind of
sure.
the size of the current organization as well.
Yeah, happy to. Marty Broadbeck, been in technology now going on 25 plus years. I started off in fintech, worked at Merrill Lynch, Goldman Sachs, or, Bankers Trust, Nomura, designing and developing electronic trading platforms. Worked in for Pfizer for 10 years. The first 5 is their chief architect, the last 4.5 is their CTO. Then went on to hold CTO positions at Diageo, Pearson, Shutterstock, and now Priceline. The size of the engineering teams I've led have been anywhere from 150 to 8,000 people. So I've seen scale and size in all shapes and sizes and forms. So that's me.
Awesome. Thanks, Marty. Alan, it'd be great to get your introduction as well.
Hi, I'm Alan Bain. I'm currently the CTO at H&M. Prior to that, held similar positions at Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola. Spent a number of years at ING in finance as well, and DHL, General Electric, and many others in different C-level roles. So happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Welcome, both of you. I guess right now we're in the midst of a pandemic and continuous transformation. And as Satya Nadella rightly said, that we've kind of shrunk like years of transformation in like a couple of months. And I'm sure you're seeing that in your respective organizations as well. So I think one of the first topics that I want to dig into is the current momentum of cloud adoption at Priceline and H&M, and how has that accelerated few projects? How has that changed your priorities within the software development lifecycle? But let's start with where are you with cloud transformation, and then we can talk about the project itself. Maybe we can start with Alan over here.
Great. So we're early on. Although we've moved 70% of the applications into the cloud and 30% to go, there's still, we haven't really cloudified them. There's a lot more of lift and shift, which is very common for large legacy companies. And we are just in the process now of insourcing and building an engineering team. A lot of that work had been done through an outsource before, where we actually have openings for 2,500 engineers on a global basis right now. So we're just trying to go through the process of building things up, getting the processes in place, the tooling, all of that stuff. Much of it's been selected. Now it's just about implementing and starting to remediate what we have done and move ourselves forward.
Got it. Marty, where are you in the process?
Yeah, we've taken a slightly different approach. Before we moved anything into the cloud, we've modernized everything around a 12-factor architecture stack running on containers and Kubernetes. And by the end of this year, we'll have roughly about 85% of our estate modernized, running in GCP on Kubernetes. We're taking the same approach on the data side. Rather than lifting and shifting, we're modernizing and moving our data infrastructure and architecture from batch to real time. And so we're roughly about 40% of the way on that journey as well.
Awesome. And to that point, like, what are some of the projects that you are prioritizing internally And by projects, I mean things around developer productivity or any of those areas that you feel are top of mind for you, not just because of the cloud transformation, but also because a lot of workforce has moved remote. And you kind of need to have a visibility around what people are doing and how efficient they are.
Yeah, we view the software development process as probably one of the most mission critical business processes for the company, because the A/B testing that we do generates a high volume of net incremental bookings per day, or NIPBD, which we measure off of. So we have three strategic categories in technology that we're making, significant investments in. The first is around developer productivity, and how we can end-to-end automate our entire CI/CD pipeline around 12-factor and Kubernetes, and taking a developer-first mindset. The second is building out a real-time data infrastructure to power insights, machine learning, and analytics. And three is really the cloud transformation, not only developing applications using 12-factor, but also researching and doing some discovery on Web 3.0 and what's going to be coming down the pike in the next 3 to 5 years.
Really cool. Alan, would love to hear more about where you guys are in terms of your priorities and projects internally.
Well, I think H&M's been around 75 years, so it's got a long legacy in retail, but also a long legacy of systems that go back many years. And up until about 5 years ago, we were on very much an expansion tear, where at one point we were opening over 400 physical stores a year. So if you can just imagine that. So systems were built for a completely different place and different time. Before I joined 14 months ago, the company had started moving into the cloud. And, so we're now going through not only looking at the cloud, but we're looking at, we need to rebuild the network. We need to go back in and change the processes. The company was fortunate to have made an omni-channel choice a couple of years ago, but we're in the process. We've already started rebuilding all of the online systems, and getting the data layer right, getting the underlying technology stack right, the architecture and all of that. So it's really pretty much a complete rewrite of those things that are most important to us, and already set up a large data science group consisting of close to 100 engineers, and plan to triple that in size over the next 2 years as well. So this is a complete transformational change of everything from underlying infrastructure to the application level.
That's really cool. It seems like there are different priorities across like what Priceline is doing and what H&M is doing. I think at H&M, you guys are rethinking the stack. You're trying to obviously become like online first, and then rewriting everything within the stack itself. And on the Priceline side, it seems like you guys are adopting a lot on the modern data infrastructure part of the stack, refining or fine-tuning your CI/CD pipelines, and also focusing a lot on developer productivity. As both of you think about all of these priorities, what's your thought process of thinking behind like whether you'll build or buy, and where do you think there are opportunities for buying externally? Marty, maybe you can start over here.
Yeah, I mean, any piece of software that we build is geared towards giving us a competitive advantage in the technology space for travel. So like our website, that when you go to Priceline.com, all of that is custom software that we've built. Where we look to buy or make buy decisions are really around the core pieces of our technology infrastructure stack. So developer productivity is one where we are certainly not going to be buying, or certainly not going to be building anything. We feel that there's a ripe ecosystem that can drive and help us with innovation. The real-time data infrastructure is another area where we're not going to be building anything. We're going to be buying. What we are going to be building are the machine learning algorithms that power our business. And on the cloud infrastructure side, again, that's one area where we'll be buying versus building our own.
Very cool. Alan, what about you? Since you're rethinking your stack, where are you in that thought process?
Well, I mean, I think it's pretty much good to hear the alignment from Art. I mean, it's those things that are competitive differentiator. You build, everything else you buy, and I think that that's sort of where we're starting from right now, and we're going through that. So things that are of interest to me is certain areas of the supply chain that we will build, because our supply chain is somewhat unique in certain areas. Other areas of it isn't. Certainly things that touch the customer we're going to build, but most of the things I would actually prefer to buy, and I'll say buy and configure, not buy and customize, or buy and operate, because there just isn't any reason to put the money there, and that's where those things I look at as for commodities. That's the commoditization of the stack for me, is to commoditize that as fast as I can to free money up for those things that are differentiating.
I totally agree. I think while that is the commoditization of the stack, and obviously you want to build your differentiation in supply chain and personalization or user experience, at the same time, like startup founders who are building for the likes of H&M and Priceline, I think they would be keen to understand and know like how should they think of differentiating themselves, because the market is definitely, as you pointed out, right? There are a lot of commoditized areas, and there would be a bunch of different tooling and companies coming up in those areas. Like what should they prioritize as like one or two areas for a company like H&M and the likes? And secondly, like how do you, in your opinion, like what would help differentiate them so that you choose them over anyone else?
I think it's my advice to, and I've worked with a lot of startups and advised a lot of startups in the Valley, is that you end up in a situation where you have to be able to provide a superior service at equal to or lower cost than what somebody has it today in order to get them to shift.
Yep.
And it can't be seen as additive unless there's a new regulatory change or some reason to do that. So you have to really be able to communicate well. It's the key here is storytelling. It has nothing to do with the tech at the end of the day. It's how well you tell your story, and does your story align with the needs that I have and the needs that my business has, in order to be able to provide the services or capabilities that are deficient or need improvement. But if you're trying to sell me something that's additive and it doesn't have a business case tied to it, it's very difficult in these times to make the case to do it.
Yep, absolutely. Marty, keen to learn from, like you mentioned some of your priorities, right, which was on developer productivity and kind of making your CI/CD more agile, and even on the cloud infrastructure side or the data infrastructure side that you are kind of working on right now. Like, what are some of the interesting tools, especially on the developer productivity side, that you've benefited from, and that companies of your scale can learn from, and also people who want to approach you from a developer productivity point of view can also learn from?
Yeah, I think Harness IO is a great tool that it's a continuous deployment pipeline built for the cloud and for Kubernetes. And one thing that we evaluate all startups around, I think Alan's spot on the business case side, but it's also time to value. If the time to value is very short, then it's certainly something that we will take a look at if it falls into those three pillars that we discussed. So, Harness is certainly, an interesting tool set for continuous deployment, continuous delivery, particularly in automating your CI/CD pipeline. RudderStack is another, startup company we work closely with. It's really a framework for capturing, data events on our website to, fuel, continuous learning of our algorithms and our machine learning capabilities within the company. So that's a fantastic startup that we've worked with, and the time to value was very quick, similar to Harness. Wiz is another one that we've worked with very closely on cloud security, and the time to value was very short. And the last one that comes to mind We've worked with, a startup company called Ivan that provides, a managed service for Kafka that can scale globally. So, those are four startups that, we've worked with that are playing a significant role within our environment and our ecosystem. The last one I'd say it's interesting because it's an open source project is a company called Slim AI
Mhm.
that does
Docker stuff.
really it does really cool Docker management of your Docker images. I mean, one of the biggest things that we've run into challenges with is the ability to do 12-factor development at scale, because the current CI/CD pipeline or ecosystem of tools like GitHub and Jenkins and some of these other tools are really geared towards development that happened 10 years ago. Now, when you're starting to develop cloud native applications, the CI/CD tooling needs to evolve, and so there's a real opportunities for startup to disrupt a multi-billion-dollar business with a next generation set of tools that's geared towards anything from Ethereum development to 12-factor development, because there's really nothing out there right now.
That's awesome. And I think a question that kind of arises from kind of what you mentioned right now is you mentioned open source. You also mentioned like companies like whether it's Rudderstack or Ivan, which are more open source. And there are many other tools that are not open source but are like free to use. And there's also this decentralization of decision making within big companies where ICs are experimenting with tools that they'd like to use, especially ones that don't have infrastructure dependencies. Because if you have the infrastructure dependencies, you have to kind of take buy-in from everyone. But if you don't have those, then you're kind of experimenting with your own tools, and then the teams or the organizations are taking decisions around what the ICs like or what they would champion for. Is that also like your approach in kind of prioritizing what you would want to buy in terms of value prop? Or are you open to kind of both sides, which might not have like usage, but are just selling top down?
Yeah, I think we try to balance both of those. I mean, we certainly embrace grassroots experimentation, because at the core DNA of Priceline is all about experimentation. However, when you're dealing with 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 10,000 engineers, there has to be the ability to operationalize capabilities that could be supported and repeated at scale. Because the only way that you make your developers more efficient is by giving them best-in-class tooling that can be automated, scale, and operated globally. And so you always have to balance innovation with how do I operationalize and scale out these technologies to serve, to Alan's point, the 2,500 engineers that he's currently hiring, or the 500 to 600 that we currently have working at Priceline. So there's a balance you need to strike between the two.
Thank you. That's super helpful. Alan, what are your thoughts on bottoms up, open source experimentation, and then purchasing from the top, assuming that they align with your business value props?
Well, I think that the challenge that companies have, and we certainly have this, is you have to have a certain level of maturity within your process, certain level of guardrails and guidelines and guardrails in place in order to be able to really unleash the power of the development teams to be able to do things. But you can't just go to complete autonomy, because then you create chaos, and I think that's the challenge. I mean, Priceline is Marty, you guys are a much younger company than I am at the end of the day, and so you've started at a different point in life with where you are, and the types of always sort of starting as an engineering organization and evolving, and we're coming at it completely differently, which was everything was outsourced except for project management. So before you can really embrace a lot of the the open source, before you can embrace what I love is just putting together the pieces of the puzzle, you have to reach a certain maturity level, and we're not there. And in many large multinational corporations aren't there because of the legacy of ERP and other things. So I'm always admire the companies that can do it. I think it's the way to go, but you have to be realistic as to what a large company can and is prepared to do based on the maturity level of the processes and the people that it has.
Sounds great. That's a pretty cool point. And I think when a lot of times when you're founding a company or a startup, you're thinking of like enterprises, FANG, mid-market, and that simplistic way of like segmenting the market. But there's so many nuances within enterprises that have been around for a while and that are newer in their vintage that I think knowing like where they are in their journeys is super important in trying to understand like how you even if your product is the same, like how do you kind of position that as a value prop to those different organizations. So that's a pretty core point as you've highlighted. I think the other point is like since both of you are closer to the end consumer, you've also seen in the last couple of months a pretty rapid change in buying behavior, where a lot of buying behavior has not just happened like offline, it's moved online. There has been a push towards like better experience, better personalization. So if I kind of switch the topic towards the data side of things or the data stack side of things, whether it's like building the basic data stack or building like more personalization using machine learning or analytics, like where are you in that journey? Might be helpful for data focused founders to understand that aspect. Alan, maybe we can start with you. I know that right now you're still rewriting the stack, but it would be good to understand the data priorities for you.
Well, I mean, I think at the end of the day, we want everything to be data led, and I think that again, large companies tend to try to historically use data to justify decisions. More modern companies let the data tell the story, and the data is free flowing, and it allows you to determine where you're going. It's a mindset shift in what you have to do. We need to democratize the data, democratize the capabilities. But again, we have tens and tens of years, decades of information that is not necessarily structured properly. It can be quite messy. It's enabled us to get where we are, but we certainly have to change it. So we're going through and we're reviewing everything from data models now to looking at our data pipelines to looking at how we're going to store the data, where it's going to be used, and all of those things. And it just takes time. So a lot of it is how do you transition away from these old systems that are still providing value to the business. And the approach that we're going to be taking is building a semantic layer in order to give us an opportunity to separate some things. But that's how we're having to handle it.
Got it. Super helpful. Marty, where are you guys, and what can founders learn from that?
I think we're a very data-driven company. I mean, a classic use case is during the pandemic we saw a shift in people bundling hotels and flights together with hotels and rental cars because they were afraid to fly, but they wanted to actually do what we called road trips. So we had really good signaling data on the platform. We were able to pivot and start creating a product within weeks based off consumer trends. I think there's two things that I think is fundamental for founders. First off, for companies like H&M and for Priceline, understanding the consumer and what they're searching on not only on Google but on your platform is important. And so marketing attribution, which is really the ability to understand clicks and conversions on your website and then feed how marketing attribution drives the Google bidding of keywords and SEM is very critical. That entire process is data driven, from the user logs and you're getting from Fastly to the data getting published on Kafka to the marketing attribution data living somewhere in your infrastructure to that data then feeding how you bid on keywords using machine learning for Google. that's a huge use case that is applicable to any e-commerce company. And most companies today have to build that capability themselves. And so, having really good marketing technology capabilities to support your marketing team is super critical in the e-commerce space. So that's the first thing. The second thing for us, going back to the use case about the hotels and rental car bundling, we've built out a real-time data infrastructure that allows us to capture click events on our platform that then powers analytics and insights in real time on the platform. So for us, the ability to use a CDP platform like RudderStack to standardize the schemas in which developers publish events to that information flowing through Kafka, and then it winds up and goes into BigQuery on our end. And then on top of that, BigQuery has TensorFlow machine learning capabilities out of the box, so you can do either batch learning or real time. And then on top of that, we're using tools like Starburst to power query as a service models in our company. And we have a semantic layer that's powered by Alation, which is really our data catalog for how we define things so people can get up to speed. But I think the big thing in order for that infrastructure to get adopted was basically a rewiring of the business and having the business understand how to use these capabilities to make decisions. And retraining our data scientists and our business analysts, which we're still doing, to take advantage of these capabilities that we're offering to them.
I think that point, the last point, right, like just retraining your data engineers, data scientists, data analysts, is I think a pretty interesting topic in today's market, right, where a lot of organizations are trying to make the entire organization more data savvy, where like you are enabling data analysts or even business users to get access to the data stack in some way or form so that you can make more informed decisions. What's been kind of the tooling or the innovation in that front that you are enabling, like either your product folks or your sales and marketing folks, or even analysts who understand SQL beyond the likes of obviously Trino and Starburst that you're using, that is enabling that? Or is that a push that you would want to kind of enable them more going forward?
I think the biggest innovation is getting data scientists, business analysts to stop using Excel and SQL. I mean, there's still, that is probably still the most popular analytics tool in the market. What anybody will tell you is using Excel and SQL. I think, I think getting people to shift towards understanding what your customers are doing in real time and how do I use tooling to get there is most important. I mean, it could be Starburst, it could be 1,000 other tools that I rattled off, but it's more of changing the mindset where we need to understand the data in real time in order to make decisions is the big shift we've had to do culturally within Priceline and are still doing today.
Awesome. Alan, what are your thoughts on that aspect, which is being able to enable the less technical users more with the capabilities of data at the click of a button?
I mean, I think that's the dream, right? It's really, that's true democratization of information. I think there's a huge education component that has to go along with that. There's a huge cultural shift that has to go along with that. We certainly want to get there, but in order to get there, we also have to make sure that our data is in halfway decent shape, because I've been in many meetings over the years where first 10 minutes of a meeting is arguing over whose information is right, whose number is right, that you come into the meeting with, and you can't have that. So we need to make sure that the data is accurate, that there's actually good data stewards, that we understand that. We also need to make sure in this day and age, the ethical use of the information. If you're going to take it out of a more centralized group and push it out, you have to worry about data ethics. So there's a lot there that has to go on to get in place. And again, younger organizations have a little bit of an advantage than the older organizations because they typically don't start out to be as diverse and don't have people as many countries or have to worry about as many regulations as large corporations such as ours. So I think it's the absolute goal that we all are facing, but it is not going to be easy to get there with an old legacy organization.
Yep, makes sense. As you think about, and Marty, you mentioned about using BigQuery and SQL tools on top of that. Obviously, the backend is powered by CDP tools as well as with Kafka's of the world. But when you think of the bifurcation or kind of the emerging patterns coming up on the warehouse side versus the data lake side, data lake being like giving you access to data from your S3 or your HDFS or any of those stores, and giving you the flexibility of using any tool on top of that data, and not leading to any lock-in, which most of the homogeneous tools on the warehousing side do end up doing at the end of the day. How do you think of the data lake side and leveraging the capabilities of the data lake instead of or in addition to the data warehouse?
The dirty little secret is, once your data goes into one of these cloud providers, it's very hard to get out of it. So, data lake architectures, I think are a good place to consolidate data that's distributed across, n number of systems. So a good place to combine finance, customer data with pricing data, et cetera. I think that makes sense. The key is to then normalize that data in a way that can be consumed in a highly declarative way for the business, whether you use Snowflake or Redshift or Aurora or Microsoft SQL, Azure services for that. What we're doing is we're consolidating all of our data into a data lake and then building normalized views of data that is specifically geared towards business purposes. So we have a customer data platform that sits on top of our data lake that harmonizes search information with interesting information about what our customers are doing on our platform. We have a finance specific normalization view that we've built on top of our data lake. And then you can query any of that data through, we're using, we talked about before, Starburst, and then there's a combination of other tools that we use as well. But that's how we kind of view a data lake. It's a highly normalized, it's an area where you can consolidate a lot of information for people to get access to, and then you can build really, normalized views on top of that.
Super helpful, Marty. Alan, do you have a point of view on the data lake side?
Yeah, and I don't know if we should call it data lakes or data swamps at this point. I mean, I think that a lot of learnings over the last 7-10 years that people have been doing these things, and do I believe that there are large repositories of information, call it a data lake, that are necessary? Yeah, but I think in this day and age, I'm much more interested in real-time streaming. And real-time information than I am of what's going on in the lake. As we move more and more things and decisions are moved out to the edge, whether it's a store, physical store location or something, I still haven't seen a way to defeat latency. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of promises of 5G on the network side and others, but I think that the data ends up having to be more and more distributed. We end up with a lot more differential updating of not of the data itself, but even the inferred information that we pull out of it. And I see that that's where there's some opportunities, because that hasn't been solved. This stuff needs to happen in milliseconds, and depending on what the type of transaction is, it's a big difference.
Yep, makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. We have a question over here from Vishakha that do you have are you thinking or actively going beyond text and numerical data to more like pixel data, like images or videos, to kind of both analyze that as well as build models around that in order to create better personalized experiences for your end users? And what's the value of of images and videos in terms of unstructured data for you?
I mean, it's not just for better personalized experiences, but the amount of information that you can get through observing from video data, from photos and other things, what we can observe and infer from that information helps everything from product development to sales to type of customer service that you can provide. I think, in fact, probably get more information from things where you can apply computer vision than you can from traditional data sources.
Marty, what have you seen on your end?
I mean, when I worked at Shutterstock, which was probably the largest, collection of image content on the planet, we looked at, ways in which images could be placed to drive, click through, advertising, etc. So there's computer vision was a big part of the strategic way in which we analyzed and published content onto the Shutterstock platform, because it was a two-sided marketplace. I think the interesting thing moving forward about, for images and video streaming and content is the way that we're looking at it anyway in Priceline is the way in which it can drive conversions and drive A/B experimentation with tailoring or merchandising images on your website for promotions or advertising. So to me, that's the big area, using feature flagging, where you can turn on and off a certain image for merchandising to drive an A/B test, for instance.
And is that the future? Are you using pixel data today in your machine learning models?
We're not using it extensively right now. We're just starting to look at using it to drive A/B testing for products on our platform.
Got it. And do you see any infrastructure challenges come up if you would implement that going forward?
I think the biggest thing is ensuring performance. And how do you use edge computing to ensure that the performance of the pixel is the same in 150 markets around the world?
Alan, are you guys using video and image data to drive all the experiences that you were talking about, or is
I would say it's more in the R&D. I would say it's more in the R&D phase right now.
Got it. Makes sense. I think one last question. I know we're running out of time. I think if both of you could pick like one interesting product or startup that you worked with and that has truly driven value for you, I think a lot of founders can learn from that experience in terms of how should they like tailor that value prop and even shorten their GTM cycles. I think one of the big things is like selling to organizations like H&M and Priceline and understanding like what is the process and or thought process that will resonate with folks like both of you if they are trying to approach you for their value prop. Marty, maybe you can start first, and then we can ask Alan as well.
Yeah. Do you want me to name a specific company that we work with and talk through the process?
I think it just makes it more real. It could be a big company now. It could be like in your early days. It doesn't have to be a new startup today. It could have been a startup back in the day.
So a long time ago in 2007, we had an interesting challenge about how we could store medical information more seamlessly. And then at a time, a startup company called Amazon Web Services came to us and said, we have a way in which you can store, clinical information at scale. And I remember taking a trip out in 2007 to Amazon, and the interesting thing about Amazon is that they had a quick time to value for us when we were working with them, and the value proposition was very clear in terms of enablement and cost. So that's one from a long time ago, where you can see where like we were one of their first customers and we became a design partner, but they shared the risk with us, which I think was good. Fast forward that now to today, one company that we've worked with pretty closely is LaunchDarkly. on their feature flagging and A/B testing capabilities. I mean, for us, A/B testing is everything. It drives the way in which we put a feature into production, and their value proposition for standing up their infrastructure to enabling feature flagging was done in weeks. And the tools were so declarative and intuitive that our developers, were clamoring for their team to get onto, the platform, which is just a great sign of the startup. And they have really good engagement from their CTO through their customer success organization. So, that's one area where for us, the time to market was very quick. The tooling was very declarative. I mean, the product team doesn't have to write any code to turn a feature on and to look at, how an experiment is doing. And, the more that you can make the tools declarative and the more that you can make the capabilities seamless for the developers to drive a level of productivity, I think it's going to be, a huge win.
That's awesome. And one is the product axes that you've just discussed, and product axes also addresses the go-to-market axes to a large extent. But like, are there any particular insights in terms of their go-to-market approach that you felt was unique?
Yeah, they came in and understood our business and had a clear use case where they thought that they could provide value. They said, we know that you guys run a lot of experiments. We think our feature flagging capability could actually accelerate the way in which you do experiments, and we're willing to do a pilot on our dime to stand up this capability because we think, this is going to be a game changer for you. So they understood our business before they came in the door. There was no learning of, what are you guys doing? What are you up to? They actually had enough business savvy to understand how e-commerce worked in our neck of the woods and where they could provide immediate value.
Awesome. Thanks, Marty. Alan, what are your thoughts? Any examples come to mind?
Yeah, no, I think that the advice is start small. Don't think that you're going to go get a global or a big contract from day one. The ones that have been successful are the ones that seed in and then prove their worth and make themselves invaluable. I mean, we just did a completely new retail experience in our Beverly Hills store with 4 different startups. They came in, for free, all brought their technology in, got everything up and running in 30 days. It's been so successful in this new retail experience that we're now talking about, we're going to let it run for 90 days. And in parallel, we're already working on building out what a potential program is to take it out through the rest of the United States for one of our brands for the next 6 months. So start small and scale. Pick who you want to work with very carefully. Know that a lot of the large corporations out there will take advantage of you, and there's others that will work with you as a partner. Some just want to pick your brains for ideas. Some of them have good intentions but don't have any money. So do your due diligence and figure out who you can really partner with and who you can trust. And I wish I could say that every large corporation is equal in this area, but the reality is there aren't. And maybe and I don't know, Mark, you would agree, but maybe there's 10% of the people like you and me that are willing to try things, and 80-90% of the CTOs and CIOs are really just trying to incrementally advance stuff.
That's
I think advice. Alan, you raise a good point. I think, listen, you're for a startup company, and we view it the same way. I'm not looking for a vendor. I'm looking for a partner. There are Fortune 500 companies out there that are not looking at technology as a competitive advantage. They're just looking to, keep up with the Joneses. And so that's why you see certain companies so far advanced, is because they're willing to take risk. And, the one thing I'll say is just do a couple things very well. 3 or 4 features very well and scale those out. When companies try to do like 5 to 10 different things, it becomes unmanageable and the message gets confused. And it's okay to say no. That would be the other thing. Honesty and transparency, under commit, over deliver is a good mantra as well.
That's great.
What you said there is important. I would rather hear somebody say, no, I can't do it. I'm not ready to do it. And then I'll say, come back to me when you are, and be open and honest, as opposed to fail because you'll never get a second shot.
Right. No, that's great advice. Thank you for highlighting that, because I think it's important to kind of come in with an open mind, start small, and be more like a partner. I think your point around recognizing who would be willing to go with you in that journey, like folks like both of you. I think that is a question as well, right? Like, as a founder, you have like limited resources, you are starting small yourself, and you want to optimize your time. What are one or two things that they can see externally from organizations that will make them believe that like this organization or this leader would be kind of the right ones to approach early on? Because they can waste a lot of time going after people who are just like taking their ideas and not willing to do anything with that.
Well, I think the first, for me is, it's, if you're a CTO and you haven't worked or advised or been on a board of a startup or have worked with a startup before, then, or have been in a startup yourself, we've understand those shoes that those guys are walking in. So, I have an appreciation for startup companies because I was in one myself. I've advised them. I sit on the board of them, so I understand it. And when you're a startup, the biggest thing that I always advise, startups is, first of all, let's focus on getting your first 5 customers. And in those first 5 customers, let's focus on 2 or 3 features that are game changers for those customers. And then once you get in, once you figure that out, then you can start looking at, what scales, like what's sticky, what are gaps or areas that we have. So that's important. 2, Alan can appreciate this because he's done it as well as, whether you like it or not, if you're a CTO in a startup company, you're in the people business. So there is a war on talent out there. And so how can you scale your engineering organization in a way where you keep the ethos and the culture of the company at the same time you empower developers to be developing great products? And that's certainly another big thing, is to take your time in picking the right people for the company, not the most people for the company. Because everyone's talking about, we got to hire so many people. I'll take 2 or 3 rock star engineers over 20 anytime, and they'll wind up cranking out more code than those 20. So it's finding the right people and getting them onto your team versus hiring many people.
Awesome. Alan, any parting comments? I'm being told to wrap up, although I can continue this conversation for the entire day, which I would love to, but I think we should wrap up after your comment.
No, I think that it's just a matter of, stay focused, which is what Marty said. Stay focused, don't overpromise. Make sure you've got some really good advisors around you that can help you be sounding board. You get one shot at things, so be truthful, transparent, but be very selective. As I always tell startups that I work with is, watch your balance sheet, watch your equity position. Don't take too much more money than you need in order to protect your way going forward against UVC's people. But at the same time, remember, it's easier to close deals with mid-market companies, and they close faster, and it preserves your equity and allows you to grow faster while you're going after the big guys. But you need the big guys to push the envelope on the future features and functions. And so you should always have one big guy that you truly are partnering with, so you know what the future is.
Awesome. Marty, Alan, really appreciate you joining this panel. And thank you for sharing all your candid thoughts. I think those are the candid thoughts that will be super helpful for founders who are dialed in and listening in as they approach organizations like yours. And since both of you are advisors to companies, I'd also urge them to kind of approach you just for advice as well as potentially feedback as well. Thank you so much for joining.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been great.